guys, since the 2021 season, we've really discussed what it will take for TFC to get back to the glory days. At length, we've discussed it. We've just looked at major areas where they need to improve. But, Kev, you believe there's still one major area that needs to be addressed on this team?
Yeah, I think even prior to Bob Bradley arriving, Kelsey, I think that they needed to address the whole spine of that side. Personally, they didn't necessarily address goalkeeping, striker department, centre-half they've addressed at the end of last season, and, of course, Sean Johnson coming in. I think that's an upgrade. But I think that the one I'm looking at really is the amount of minutes that Michael Bradley actually played last year. He played over 10 minutes across the course of the season. I think at his age, personally, I think it's far too much for him to be doing. Julian, you and Stevie have both told me, and many other guys who I know, how difficult it is to play in the MLS. The travel, playing at altitude at times, playing on turf. I don't think it suits Michael Bradley, the amount of time he's had on the field. And I feel, at times when I've been watching him, I feel as though that he's a little bit slow to react. He can't necessarily cover the ground. And it's not necessarily the long running. That's something that I would feel as though he could easily do. It's the little 3 and 4 yard runs that I feel, Kelsey, where he just might struggle to make up that ground that he needs to do.
You say make up the ground, but he's still top 2 or one of the top players on the team in balls received and touches on the ball, ground covered as well, amongst the leaders in the league. But that's not good enough, in your opinion?
No, as I was saying before, it's not necessarily the ground covered. I think straight line running is fairly easy. I was there myself, probably at his age, where I always feel as though getting up and down the pitch is not a problem. I feel as though the big weakness, certainly that was in my own game, and I'm not necessarily saying that Michael Bradley's legs have gone, but it looks to me that he can't make up the little 2 and 3 yard runs that I feel as though that's exposing TFC's defence and allowing too many shots to go into that goalkeeper far too often, in my opinion. That's the way that I would look at it, Julian, when I'm seeing it.
Yeah, and I look at the players 30 and over throughout the league. Victor Wanyama, Diego Chara, Darling Nagbe. These are guys who are rotated every now and then, and they're fresh when they play.
These are the clips, Julian, that I think the little 1-2s around him, not able to get across to the guys that's only 4 and 5 yards away from him. Yes, it's a goalkeeping mistake, but that's preventable at source. 1-2s again, you step across your man following the ball. It looks easy. It looks like, to me, that sort of ground covered is almost as if I'm quite content just to hold my ground and not necessarily get close. Again, it's such a difficult thing to actually pinpoint when you're looking at it. But I feel that that's what's exposing TFC's centre backs far too often, far too readily, Julian.
My former position being a defensive midfielder, one of the hardest things, but also the most important thing, is defending and making sure you're covering space and reading the play. This is a perfect picture here where you start to see him drop. And what that happens, it throws everyone out of whack. Matt Hedges now has to step up. You see Mark Anthony Kaye giving direction, but he's now stepping out of position. And I think this is where he doesn't have the legs now like he used to cover the ground the way he's supposed to. It's hard for him to track runners. And that's another thing that, a defensive midfielder needs to be able to do to prevent those chances
the thing is,
in the final
what
third.
I would say as well, Julian, this is not isolated incidents. Honestly, there's so many of these incidents that I find with TFC when I'm watching them, how exposed they look at times. This was last week against San Jose. He gets rolled on the edge of the penalty area. That's preventable. You stop that pass getting into the striker's feet. This should have been a goal for San Jose, actually, as it turned out. They should have scored in this position. And I just feel as though they're getting too exposed. And again, I don't want it to feel like it's a character assassination on Michael Bradley, because it certainly isn't that. But the father-son relationship, does Bob Bradley really want to tell his son that you're not necessarily up to speed and you're actually leaving us a little bit exposed? I don't feel that he probably would want to have that conversation with his son.
No, it's a hard conversation, and also a very, interesting and unique scenario to be in as a player or teammate of Michael Bradley, because players might want to talk about that, but you cannot talk about that in the change room to obvious reasons. So I think this is where that dynamic in itself, it's very strange in my eyes at the highest levels. Toronto FC is the top club in our country. So this is an example that needs to be set in terms of what is an actual professional environment like, for pro players to be in. And that, for me, is not what pro players are comfortable walking into in a locker room like that.
Let me put it back at you, though, Jules. If you take him out of the side, is there a workable solution there?
Yeah, one, you could rotate him. I think if you rotate him, keep him fresh, I think that's a way to go. Because you look at the other 35-plus players in terms of their age throughout the league, Wanyama, Chara, Nagbe, these guys are not playing every single minute for their club. So they're keeping them fresh. But, to your point, Kelsey, I think where he brings a lot of value, I think it could be in terms of him having the direction with youth. You know, we've seen Ralph Priso, Okello, Liam Fraser. I think these are players that had the potential to step into the shoes of Michael Bradley, but was prevented to doing so because he was always taking that role, that position. Now, Mark-Anthony Kaye, I think, is the perfect solution to have him come in and replace Michael Bradley if he's not on the pitch, because Mark-Anthony Kaye could do exactly what Michael Bradley does in terms of being on the ball, but defensively he will have the legs to cover ground and close players down. I think he's a bit fresher. Brandon Savarnia, Jonathan Azario could play the number 10, number 8 positions, but you know, do we need Michael Bradley every minute of the way throughout the season to win anything or to get playoffs? I highly doubt we will see anything like that if he does play every minute.
Yeah.